Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Um, Thanks for joining us so early in the morning. But I think what we have to announce is worth getting up for. There hasn't been a great deal of concentrated contemporary music activity in the city for a long time. There used to be an annual festival which was run by the late Frank Waxman. Not Frank.
Yeah.
Franz. Frank is a very, very prominent name on my brain at the moment. But there hasn't been anything of this nature for a considerable number of years. We planned it, I must admit, to be an even more extensive thing than we are going to be able to do. But the simple reason why we had to, this year, do without a number of fringe concerts and fringe events with chamber music and happenings and all sorts of things is merely lack of funds. We always lack funds, and I'm sure we're going to lack funds at the end of this series, but we feel it's absolutely imperative to make a major move to acquaint the public here with what's going on in music. And to make such a major move, we felt we have to start with playing some of the music that has contributed this century towards what is happening now. So you'll see the series is divided into two concerts, which more or less indicate how 20th century music was, how it came to be, and two concerts about how it is. But I'm not going to say much more at this stage. You'll doubtless have lots of questions, but I'll hand over to Mr. Mehta and Mr. Zappa, who have far more pertinent things to say than I could ever do. Mr. Mehta. Hit it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that, by the way, was Mr. Ernest Fleischmann, our new executive director.
I'm still very
that
old.
We should have introduced before he started speaking. Thank you for coming here. And as Mr. Fleischmann indicated, especially in the month of May, we feel there's a great void of music making in Los Angeles, apart from the fact that until now we didn't have reason to even book the orchestra. We have, by new contractual commitments, all the month of May now to fill with the musicians. We cannot come into the music center because of the Civic Light Opera, which is our yearly curse, when they come in the middle of April. And we cannot get into the music pavilion until the middle of October again. And with the growing contractual demands from the musicians, we are, of course, very lucky to have the 10 weeks at the Hollywood Bowl, but we must, from next season and from the end of this season, think of new ways to fill in the time that is required. Since there has been always a void of orchestral contemporary music in Los Angeles, we thought it was an ideal occasion in the month of May to do a festival of modern music, because modern music in Los Angeles so far has been concentrated to the Monday evening concerts at the museum, which have been doing a great job since the last so many years. But on the orchestral level, it's just the occasional contemporary piece that the Los Angeles Philharmonic plays once in a while throughout the season, mixed with a lot of classical and romantic music, which has been the only representation of this kind of music in the city. We thought during the month of May it would be very worthwhile to do a complete festival of contemporary music, and this year it will be divided into 4 weeks of having one concert a week, which gives us time to properly rehearse this music, which requires a lot of pre-concert rehearsal, plus of course the usual activities of the Los Angeles Philharmonic also giving concerts in the hinterland throughout, and schools. We are also, throughout the month of May, giving concerts for children in Watts, and in the Mexican district of town we are giving concerts. So together with all that, we are encompassing this very ambitious Festival of Modern Music, which, as Mr. Fleischmann pointed out, would comprise of 4 concerts, 2 depicting those pieces of the modern repertoire which have already become classical. One of them will be conducted by myself, and the other by Mr. Pierre Boulez, whom I think, whose acquisition to the festival is indeed a great coup on our part, since Mr. Boulez will not be coming to Los Angeles except for this concert for many seasons because of his new commitments with the New York Philharmonic and with the Cleveland Orchestra.
The BBC.
And he has also taken up another job in England at the BBC. Those 2 concerts will be primarily concentrated on modern 20th century classics, where I will conduct 2 works by Stravinsky and the Concerto for Orchestra by Bartók, and Mr. Boulez has taken up the Chamber Symphony by Schoenberg, 5 pieces, and the variations by Anton Webern, and the Stravinsky symphonies and the Firebird Suite. The 2 other concerts, of course, primarily for myself more exciting, are the fact that in the first concert of the festival we will be premiering on the West Coast a piece, 5 pieces by Anton Webern, which is something very unusual, since the great Austrian composer, who has been dead since 1948, has still pieces that have not been performed neither in Los Angeles nor in the rest of the United States very much. We intend to take the 5 pieces of Webern on our tour to New York and also give the first New York performance of these pieces. They'll be followed by a non-orchestral composition by local composer Mr. Morton Subotnick, whose electronic tape Play 4 will be played between the Webern and, after intermission, the very exciting new composition by Luciano Berio, the Swingle Singers dedicated piece, which is called Symphonia, which, as you know, was up for lots of awards this year, and for a piece of contemporary music has sold more records than any other in my estimation. Mr. Berio has written this symphony for the Swingle Singers in the New York Philharmonic, which was performed last year with great success, and we have the Swingle Singers here to premiere it in the Los Angeles performance.
Maybe I should add that the New York premiere consists only of 4 movements. He's written a final movement which will be heard at this performance too. The third concert, which is the second one of new contemporary music, will of course feature as the main work Mr. Zappa's piece, which he told me this morning will be ready in about 10 days, and whose title we've just improvised on this information sheet we've given you. It has not been yet decided, but since it was a piece for the Mothers of Invention and Orchestra, I just put down that it would be called Concerto for Mothers and Orchestra. It has not been decided, though. I think maybe Mr. Zappa can tell us what it will be called.
Excerpts from 200 Motels.
For Mothers and Orchestra, right? We couldn't manage to put it in on Mother's Day. That Sunday the 10th is our other concert. But what is very interesting about that concert, first of all, is that we'll be premiering some of the mobiles of Mel Powell, who, as you know, is the director of the new Cal Arts Disney Academy of Music, and we'll be playing the Integral of Edgar Varese. But after that we perform the Integral, Mr. Zappa and his group, the Mothers of Invention, will give their version of the Integral also, after which they will play something of their own choice, and After the intermission, we will combine the two, the Los Angeles Philharmonic and the Mothers of Invention, to play this new premiere of Mr. Zappa. I must say, we have been very fortunate of getting Mr. Zappa to perform with us this piece, since he is going to premiere it at the Holland Festival in Amsterdam later in June. And so there had to be a little bit of negotiation on his and our part so that we could premiere it in America before the European performance. Maybe Mr. Zappa can tell us something about that.
Well, the performance in Los Angeles is going to be what you might describe as a scaled-down preview of the large work, which runs something like 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on the length of the improvisation. That's the piece in its complete state in Holland will run about that long. The complete work requires a large orchestra, chorus, narrator, soprano soloist, 3 dancers, an industrial vacuum cleaner, and a small 16mm projector that makes a lot of noise, plus a dental health film. And we've been financed by the Dutch government for the deluxe version of this piece. And that wasn't too easy to do, but at least it was possible to do it there rather than in the United States. I've been composing since I was 14. The first time I got a chance to hear my music performed before an audience was when I was 20. It cost me $300, which was all the money that I had at that time. It was performed by a student orchestra at Mount St. Mary's. They murdered the music, and I tried to stay away from the serious end of the business ever since that time. And this will be the first chance that I've had to hear any of my orchestral music performed since that early Mount St. Mary's disaster. And I hope that the acoustics at the Pauley Pavilion at UCLA will allow some of the subtleties to come through. What we're going to perform at that date in May will not include the chorus. It will only use the electric group and the symphony orchestra. We had to leave some of the hot parts out. But
we hope to do them later, in fact, in toto, in a deluxe version here too.
I'd love that.
Particularly the hot parts.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether you can do the hot parts in Los Angeles.
There's nothing you can't do in Los Angeles. What happens afterwards, I mean, we'll all be done, but that's all right.
I can just see the city council stopping a concert in progress when the industrial vacuum cleaner comes out and does what it's supposed to do. Well, now what do we do?
We'll ask for questions to start.
Well, maybe Mr. Fleischmann can describe a little bit the fact that we are doing this concert at the Pauley Pavilion and how
Yes.
he's going to go about it. Because neither Frank or I have any idea of how it's going to sound in there.
We're very conscious of the fact that the acoustics at Pauley aren't conducive to, optimum acoustics.
They're
However,
great for a basketball game.
we've got the people who are working on the sound system at the Hollywood Bowl, Chris Jaffrey office, who are by far the most experienced and the most successful sound people as far as both indoor and outdoor music performance is concerned. They are responsible for the sound reinforcement there, and I have every confidence, knowing quite a lot of their work in other places, that the subtleties and everything else will be heard.
Why don't you tell them about that bowl that you're bringing out?
Oh yes, we're getting a shell which has been used for similar purposes back east, and which has been designed in conjunction with a sound system for use in large-scale sort of basketball and similar pavilions. We're getting that specially out for this performance, so I think it'll be all right. In fact, I'm pretty confident it'll be all right. I should mention one thing. Subotnik's piece that we're doing at the first concert isn't entirely for tape. It also involves a soprano, who will be Christian Legrand of the Swingle Singers, 3 instrumentalists who actually occasionally get to play their instruments, and 4 other instrumentalists who are going to be frustrated and will never be able to really put their instruments to their lips. It's an exciting piece and I think an amusing one at the same time. We're lucky that Subotnik settled here now. He's also on the staff of CalArts, of the new CalArts Institute. He couldn't be with us today because he's back east. But that opening concert, I think, will create the kind of excitement that this whole series is supposed to have, and it will be sustained right along down the line. One other thing I should say is that we're going to dispense with the usuals of program notes and that sort of stuff at these concerts, but the conductors and composers will talk to the audience beforehand about their pieces, and there will be time afterwards for discussion with the audience, to answer questions from members of the audience and so on and so forth. It'll be a kind of sort of open forum and as relaxed and as informal as possible. The 5 pieces of Webern that Mr. Mehta mentioned, I should also say that 3 of them, these are posthumous pieces, 3 of them have been played so far by the Philadelphia Orchestra, but 2 of them have never been heard in this country. They've only had 1 performance at the Cologne radio so far. Right, questions?
Yeah, Frank, this really isn't as far afield for the Mothers Convention as some people might think. This is kind of a logical next step after the little house they used to live in.
Well, it's a weird thing for the mothers to do because, as you know, the mothers don't exist anymore. But we're putting them back together because this is the first opportunity that the group has had in the 5 years that it was on the road to actually play with a symphony orchestra. We've made attempts in the past to do collaborations with orchestras here and in New York, but nothing has ever happened because of the financial difficulties involved in mounting a production of that nature. You have just too many expenses, you know. Nobody wanted to risk eating it on a show like that. So.
But in a musical sense, this isn't really illogical, is it?
No, it wouldn't be illogical for the group. We have a reputation for doing strange and absurd things on stage, and some people overlook the fact that the guys can really play. You know, they're good musicians, and other people overlook the fact that the strange stage presentation that we have is integral to the music.
May I say at this point that from our point of view, from the professional classical musician standpoint, it's very difficult for us to speak with some of the rock boys because since they have been trained only to play those few pieces that they don't know musically anything that we talk about. We experienced this recently at a television show we did with some of the rock groups. And some, like Mr. Zappa and his group, are so oriented with our style of music and our language, our idioms, our technical expressions, that I don't think there'll be any trouble really getting together with them in that sense of the word at all.
There's also one very important point. You probably know that quite a few rock groups and composers have tried to integrate write pieces for symphony orchestra and group, and every one of those has failed for one very simple for 2 reasons. One, that the composers haven't realized at all the nature of a symphony orchestra, and secondly, they've been so overawed by writing for a symphony orchestra that they've turned out the most square, dull, old-fashioned stuff that's imaginable. A symphony orchestra can let go. A symphony orchestra can make, in every way, I'm convinced, the impact that the best of rock can make. But it needs a musician like Mr. Zappa who realizes this to make the orchestra live and swing and become part of that whole experience. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If the orchestra is going to swing at all, it'll probably take place in Los Angeles because you have very good players in Los Angeles. And although I've never worked with the Los Angeles Philharmonic before, I've worked individually with some of the musicians on recording dates and other ways, and they've been most cooperative, and I think they'll go along with some of the unusual things in the score, and we should be able to produce some interesting sounds and visual events with the members of the orchestra as well as with the mothers.
Mr. Fleischmann raised an interesting point about idiom. Mr. Zappa, could you say something about the 200 motels, what it consists of idiomatically? Could you analyze it a bit?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you about the title of 200 Motels. What the music is a collection of pieces and musical ideas which were composed during the time that I was on the road with the mothers. After we would finish a concert, I'd go back to the motel, generally a Holiday Inn, and sit at the little Formica table by the television set, and after heating up some of the instant coffee and the little gizmo they have by the toilet, I would take out some of the music paper I would drag around in my suitcase, and I would just write down all these absurd things that would come into my mind after the concert. And the complete piece is everything that I could find out of my briefcase from all those road trips, all lumped together into this one monstrosity. And the musical styles encompass vary from extremely tonal music that you could recognize and hum to sort of noisy, percussive craziness. And then there's angular absurdities, and then there's open spaces in the music that will allow for events to take place that you make up at the concert, to keep it spontaneous so that the musicians don't yawn while they're counting their rests. In some parts of the music, the actions of the players in the orchestra are choreographed, because it's always a danger when you have about 90 people sitting around and some of them aren't playing, they nod out and then it looks bad. So instead of having them just sit there and count 200 bars, I have them standing and turning around and snapping their fingers and clapping their hands and making noises with their mouths and doing various other things that will reveal to the audience that they're actually human beings and have body functions, even though they're wearing tuxedos and sitting on a stage, that their body functions still continue throughout the music. So you will have things like the entire string section producing body function noises as a chorus, while the percussion, maybe we have a 6-piece percussion section happening in this event. They'll be wailing away over to one side, and all the violins will stand up and belch.
No press is allowed at rehearsals. We wouldn't imagine what will go on there.
Frank, on the Rubin and the Jets album, there was a note, something to the effect that, is this an attempt by the Mothers of Invention to gain respectability by going under another name? So is this concert a posthumous attempt by the Mothers of Invention to gain respectability?
No, let me correct what the inscription was in Rubin and the Jets. It says, is this the Mothers of Invention recording under a different name to get their crappy music on the radio? And this concert is not a posthumous attempt. It's a marvelous opportunity. Like, I should be so lucky as to get my music played any place, but to bring the Mothers out of mothballs to work with a symphony orchestra, sure, what the heck. The guys will get a charge out of it.
Yes?
Hi, Mr. Fleischmann, Mr. Mehta. I'm curious about how the subscription list or the Symphony Association is going to take this marked change in departure, change in images.
Well, this has nothing to do with the main subscription audience of the winter season. As I said before, from the middle of April, we are out of this hall itself. We move into the Amundsen Theater, and this will be a completely new subscription. We hope that some of our subscribers will also come there, but we want actually quite a new audience there. We want the young people, we want the university people also, who we find through experience of programming at the Philharmonic that there is a certain group of young people, not only in Los Angeles but all throughout the United States, that take more to this music than to the regular Brahms and Bruckner public. And we hope to attract this kind of an audience too. We want them to come because we want to play to people who will really react to this kind of music, actually.
I should, however, add that in my talks with various groups of orchestra supporters, subscribers of various committees, I've become very much aware of their also feeling that they want to get to know more about what's going on in music today. They want to learn, at least. And so it's not going to be as an altogether one-sided thing. I do expect, and press doesn't usually come to our Sunday afternoons or Friday nights, particularly Sunday afternoons, but we do get a much younger and much more representative audience at those concerts, and I do expect a good number of those to be sufficiently interested to come to these concerts as well.
Seems to me that you wouldn't have too much trouble getting a full house.
Well, I hope.
Depends on you. Depends what you do. We will do our level best. We are not, of course, concerned at all about the Amundsen Theatre, because it's first of all about only 2,000 seats, and we expect for especially the first concert with the Barrier, there will be enough excitement, and Mr. Boulez, etc. But of course the Poly Pavilion, we have only gone there because we feel that we cannot present Mr. Zappa in such a small surrounding.
We can't.
We would have to do it 2 or 3 times.
We can't get. We physically can't get into either the Amundsen or the pavilion.
The Liberace?
Well, Liberace some of the time, Jean-Louis Barrault some of the other, and then the Civic Light Opera. And as Mr. Mehta said, that's one of the crosses we have to bear.
We are fighting the cafe house, you know what I mean? The mediocre 1920s that are invading us from time to time.
Do you think it might be a good fuel for the fire in terms of the opposition to contemplate having an occasional rock concert at the Music Center? You might get an audience for it.
Certainly.
Well, we have the concerts at the Music Center depends on the impresario's economical facilities, right? They presented 2 weeks ago Bobby Sherman. Was that Full House?
No, Jimmy Webb, you mean?
Oh, yeah, Jimmy Webb.
Yeah.
Was that a full house?
Was that full?
It wasn't altogether full, but it was a good house.
The music to pack the Music Center is one of the strangest. There is no formula. 2 days ago, I went to the concert of the debut orchestra where I couldn't even get a free seat available. Charles Aznavour was completely a half house. Jascha Heifetz was just barely packed last year, and I can't believe sometimes the things that the Music Center does not pack for. It's a very amazing phenomenon that occurs.
You see, the economics of most of the big rock promoters are such that the 3,200 seats at in the pavilion aren't sufficient for the top groups from the point of view of how much money they can take out of there. But certainly, I think it would only be to the good and would rid the Music Center of some of the underserved ivory tower establishment image that it's got.
Are there any acoustical alterations being planned beyond that?
No.
Philharmonic is involved a lot of rock classical music and television special albums and bowl plans that have been announced already. Is there any institutional connection between Lagzatzappateers and those events, or is it just part of the same general?
There's nothing institutional about what we do whatsoever.
That would seem to me to be a major shift from the past, is it? 10 years ago, this orchestra was the institution of Los Angeles.
It's only been made that by people who write about it and talk about it.
No, listen, 10 years ago, the entire music scene was different, you must admit. 10 years ago, there was no rock as we have it today, not popular mass rock. There was rock existing in the hinterlands. But 10 years ago, we had the big jazz. We didn't think in those days there was a single composer to make this fusion. There were always European composers who tried to do something, and it didn't really mix at all. 10 years ago, the entire scene has been different. 10 years ago, if you played antiphonal music of Gabrieli, nobody knew about it. But because of the fact that the modern rock musicians have brought in a sort of a feel of old music, because of their liking for old English Elizabethan music and Bach, etc., suddenly the young people like Baroque music today. Baroque music has never been popular before the last 2 years. So the entire system is changing a little bit too. And it's good that we recognize it and we want to do something about it.
It's a natural evolution. The other thing is, obviously, if this works, we do want to make it a regular feature of our work and, if possible, expand it. And to that extent, we're going to try and seek funds to keep on making it better in the future. And not that it won't be good now, but there are so many things when one plans a series like this that one really wants to do and is stopped from doing by money, the lack of available auditoria, and also just by time. There's a great deal of interesting stuff happening that we are going to, over a period, try and incorporate in our work.
This program is from the Pacifica Radio Archive. For more information or to get copies, call Pacifica, area code 818-506-1077, or write to Post Office Box 8092, Universal City, California, 91608 0092.